For anyone that's this is their first Hub Insights session that they're watching, these are our chance to get to know members of the community and members of those that are involved in developing, using, working with digital twins. This is the last one of the current series where we've been talking to different vendors or suppliers that are developing or looking to develop digital twins in some guise or another. All of the talks have been absolutely fascinating so far. We've had everything from data processing things all the way to game engines, and we got something different again today. So really looking forward to chatting to Andy this morning. As always, we'll try and keep as close as possible to the half an hour, so everyone can get on with their day at 9 o'clock sharp. So yeah, without kind of further ado, we'll get started. So we're joined by Andy Parnell-Hopkinson this morning. He's a business development manager at AMC Bridge. So yeah, Andy, it'd be great if you could just kind of spend a few minutes introducing yourself, give a little bit of background on what your role is at AMC Bridge, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, and morning, everyone. Today's my first anniversary at AMC Bridge.
Congrats.
It's kind of an auspicious start for the day. My background is in IT sales, basically. Having graduated in maths and psychology, and therefore with no obvious career path, I just decided to sell computers to pay the rent, and after a couple of years was drawn back towards the engineering sector. That was back in the early 90s when 64-bit computers were first coming out, and suddenly you could address 4 billion times as much data, and people started to do some really exciting things, particularly with 3D CAD and design. And say in the early 90s, I kind of got swept into that sector and pretty much never left since. I've tried a few times, but they pull you back in. So I've sold CAD and PLM software and manufacturing software, CAM software. I've sold hardware for those users as well, almost consistently since the early 90s, and I've done that across obviously UK, Northern Europe, Asia Pacific, and for a short period in France. But je ne parle pas français, so that was a bit of a problem. And a little bit in America, working with the workstation manufacturers.
Okay.
So it's kind of been broad and varied, and I've been lucky enough to, because of the products and solutions I've been offering, to work with literally the biggest engineering companies in pretty much in each country. So it's great to name drop people like Rolls-Royce and Jaguar Land Rover, Volvo, Skanska, and then perhaps a little bit more obscure people. For a time I was covering Slovenia, so my clients included Gorenje, who's the biggest manufacturer there. In Turkey, I was looking after Arçelik, who's a massive consumer goods manufacturer, and the same around the world. So, it's been a fascinating journey,
Have you got a favourite kind of country from your globetrotting?
It's a good question. My favourite city, I know this one because I've rehearsed it, is Istanbul.
Oh, nice.
I remember landing at about past midnight on my first trip, and it was the night of the equivalent of the FA Cup final, and the streets were packed. I mean, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. The streets were packed with Fenerbahce fans, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I just loved the country and the city from that day onwards. I haven't been for 20 years, so yeah, show my age. But Istanbul's my favourite city. But in terms of country, it's a close call between India and China, and I only have to say India probably shades China because I've seen more of it. Okay. But I've got, my wife and I have actually got a trip, sort of a tour booked to China in October. Sadly, I don't think we'll be going this year because I want to see more of it as a tourist and less in a suit and tie. But no, I love travel. It's always been a big motivation for me, and the last year and a half has been frustrating, but it's eased my conscience about my carbon footprint a little bit. So
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume most people aren't currently knowledgeable of who AMC are.
It's a very safe assumption.
Yeah. Can you kind of take us through, I guess, who AMC are, what they do, and what your role is there, I guess, as well.
Yeah, sure. So basically, AMC Bridge is a software outsource developer or outsourced software developer. We came into existence in 1999 when our two founders, who were working for Boston-based CAD companies, presented them with the opportunity to develop their software development pipeline, but at a lower cost, and they outsourced back to colleagues and friends in Ukraine. So and from that data, so over 21 years now, that's all we've done. We just focus on outsourced software development. So we don't sell software, we sell services, and just for engineering applications. And we started out, as I say, focusing on primarily PTC and SolidWorks, because that's where our founders came from, who are sort of leaders in the mechanical CAD market. But as we've grown our customer base, those partners, those vendors, have expanded their footprint, and we've grown with them. So and occasionally we've been, often by referral, we've been called into startups to help them stabilize and productize their concepts and their developments. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of the time those startups then get bought by the bigger companies. So so we're very proud now that we're contracted by pretty much all of the major CAD and PLM software developers to a greater or lesser extent. Sometimes it's on a project basis, so we'll develop a particular product or solve a particular problem for them, and sometimes it's on a long ongoing contract basis. So yeah, the question I often get asked is, well, surely these software vendors have got their own development teams, so why do they need you? And it's true, but what we bring is that specialist knowledge. Although we've got obviously strict confidentiality rules about what information we can share, and that no information can leak from one project or from one client to another. It's that fundamental knowledge about how all these applications are built, how they work, how the data is structured, the fundamental maths, the geometry engines, the parametric engines, the logic that sits underneath the software and the data. We know all of that, and that's our special sauce, if you like. It's just by focusing in those sectors, on those application areas. And as I say, as we've grown, we've got more clients, and we've been pulled into adjacent areas. So I think we probably started to get involved in BIM and construction in the early 2000s, and then a startup that we were doing work for in the late 2000s was acquired by Autodesk, and that was really how we first got involved with Autodesk. I should say, any client that I mention is public knowledge. They're listed on our website, but the majority of our clients aren't even listed. I can't mention them, and I certainly can't say the kind of work we do for them, with very few exceptions. Yeah. So the software that we'd written for this other company that was acquired by Autodesk, and that really got us involved with them, and that really has expanded our activity in the architecture, engineering, construction, and now operation market. And again, we've got, by adjacency, we've got involved in AR, VR, in IoT, in digital twins, robotics, point cloud management, and processing, and a whole bunch of other things that I probably can't even remember. Oh, engineering analysis, manufacturing. So everything to do with making things, whether that thing is, your mobile phone, or a building, or a bridge, or indeed how you use those assets. We write software for those vendors. I got involved with AMC only, say, just over a year ago. Should have been a bit earlier, but it was delayed a bit because of COVID. Because the clients I was talking to in my previous role, where I was selling laser scanners, they were creating data, point clouds in that particular case, but they were being absorbed by engineering departments and facility management departments, and all of those different teams all had their own specialist applications that did their job really well, but they were really lousy at sharing data with other departments. So you had these, classic case of data silos, where everybody believed that they owned the data, and nobody was actually right, because if you're only looking at one version of the data, then be damn sure it's wrong, because somebody else changed it, and if you don't know, then you're in trouble. So I was talking to a former colleague in the US, and I was describing this frustration that I could see all these clients that had this need for custom solutions to break down these silos and make more transparent workflows. And he just said, hold that thought, because we're thinking of expanding into Europe. This could be just the right time. So here I am. And saying that's basically what my role is clearly still to work with software vendors. So we're still doing the back-end development for those people, providing those specialist services, the project-based or expansion of their knowledge base. But we're now more and more working with enterprise customers who've got this situation where they've got these experts using highly complex software systems for designing and managing the data that they create, but with the frustration that it's really hard for them to share it either with each other or with their client. And there's some clear opportunities that I see that are really not consistently addressed. And the biggest one for me, sort of a segue into talking about digital twins and the benefits of digital twins, is the handover between construction and operation.
Yeah.
I went to a presentation in AEC Next in Los Angeles last year. If I remember the data correctly, it was something like 7% of the lifetime cost of a building over 25 years. 7% is absorbed in design and build. Something like 2% was spent on handover, which is astonishing. And then the remaining 91%, if I've done my maths right, is in operating the building. And what that says to me is that all this focus and this kind of hunger from the construction sector to do digital twins, unless they're actually directly getting input from the operators and from the owners, why are they doing it? They're not actually the ones who are going to be operating the building by and large. So the real demand has to come from operations, and it's that handover, that missing link. It's a black art in itself. There's people who've done a great job and built a great career out of doing handover from construction to operation, but it's just data. And this is a frustrating thing for me, is it's just data. So why not just take it from there and put it in there? What's so difficult about that? And yet that's not, generally speaking, not very well addressed in the market.
No, and I guess that's kind of a good question to move on to, which is how do you see a digital twin? What's your kind of understanding of what a digital twin is? Because it's still a really hot topic. People still haven't agreed on it. So it's kind of a question I like to ask everyone is kind of, what is a digital twin to you?
Well, and of course, the corollary to that is what isn't a digital twin. The two favourite topics. Actually, Sam, just to step back, for me, it's frustrating that people are still arguing about BIM. What is it, and do we need it? For me, it's all about managing data through the asset's life cycle. And say, nearly 30 years back, when I was getting involved with manufacturing engineering companies, and then in the late 90s when I was actually selling those PLM systems, where you work with an entire manufacturing business through the entire life cycle of the product, from conceptualization, industrial design, engineering design, manufacture, handoff to manufacture, commissioning, use, recycling, and destruction. And that product life cycle is something which is an extremely well-established process and practice in manufacturing. And yet, in the construction sector, people are still arguing about whether you should put all the product data when you're doing the design. And again, when we were talking before, when I've been involved in selling 3D CAD workstations and 3D peripherals in the past, and I get to talk to architects who are using 3D software, but still they were working in 2D. And it was like, no, we've been building buildings like this for thousands of years. There's no need to change. But the problem is that there is a need to change, because things have changed. You do need to know what the material is. You do need to know what its fire properties are, for God's sake. You do need to know the mass. You do need to know the life cycle impact. And if you're not embedding that data at the beginning, you're basically just kicking the can down the road for somebody to do it later. So we need to have data-rich models from the outset, handed over to the clients digitally, so that they're not having to recreate the data and just waste money. And in the end, any money that's wasted on data handover, ultimately we're paying for. Yeah. Someone somewhere is paying for, and it usually, trickles down to the consumer. So we're paying for the inefficiency of the process. And this data exists. So why the hell can't it just be transferred through? And once it's actually been absorbed into the building management system or the CAFM system, which the operator will undoubtedly be using if it's anything more complicated than a domestic residential dwelling, that data should be fed straight into there and then maintained in there. And that's actually, for me, is where the digital twin comes alive. Construction process is where the data should be created. It needs to be maintained through the build process. And again, this was something which I was a little bit involved in my previous company with the laser scanners, is actually tracking as built against as planned. And there's no reason realistically why the coordination model and the schedule couldn't be updated regularly, whether that's daily or weekly. Monthly is too long. If you're updating your as planned with your as built on a monthly basis, you've already got a month's worth of rework. The ideal situation would be that somebody is actually monitoring it live, but it needs to be done digitally. Having a person doing it is doubling up the effort, so clearly a waste of time. But if the as planned, the schedule, the works orders, the as built are all coordinated, then at the point where you finish the build, there should be there should be no snagging, and B, the data should be ready to be absorbed directly into the CAFM or BMS system, if indeed it hasn't already been done as part of the handover process. It's just data. It is just ones and noughts. There's absolutely no reason why you can't do that, as long as you understand how that data is structured and which bits are important and which bits aren't. And again, to people who say, well, the digital twin doesn't need to have all the building data. You don't need to have down to nuts and bolts and the fabric of the building. Well, I would say, Grenfell, you do need to know what's in the fabric of the building. I'd say asbestos, commonly used, post-war, and then suddenly it became a problem. And if you don't have the data, it's a bigger problem. And the data exists, so just keep it, don't throw it away. You may not necessarily need to expose it all the time or update it all the time, but if the data exists, throwing it away is well, it's literally burning money. Somebody somewhere may want to use that. At the very least, when that structure, when that asset reaches the end of its life cycle and it needs to be destructed, again, I've met clients in the past, demolition companies, who have to create BIM models in order to know how to demolish a building. Well, duh. I mean, let's anticipate that things don't last forever and actually use that knowledge so we can make it more efficient. So this is my frustration is if we look at the need, then that actually, if we set out with the end in mind, then that determines how we actually go into the process. And that's where I think we should be focusing from the point of view of digital twins, is what actually am I going to be doing with the data, and therefore, how do I structure it in the first place? Not, I'm designing this thing, I'm going to call it a digital twin. There you go. There it is, Mr. Client. I've got your digital twin for you.
And in your mind, what do you think? Are you kind of in the camp that digital twins are just a rebranding of high fidelity models that already exist, or do you think there is a kind of unique differentiator for them?
It's a development. It's not new. I mean, we know that the term digital twin has been kicking around since at least the early 2000s, but primarily in the engineering manufacturing space. It's something which I think the construction sector has latched onto. Again, with all due respect to colleagues and customers in that market, there is a tendency to look at technology for its own fascination. I think, I don't know whether it's because buildings are often looked at as, every building's a prototype, and therefore it's fair to approach each one as an R&D project. And in that case, let's look at this shiny new toy, let's look at this shiny new technology and see if we can do something with it. As a career salesman, I always start out with, what's the problem? What's the end need? And let's work back from that. not let's look at this piece of technology and see if there's some way we can use it. Again, if I had £1 for every time I've read a press release about some new startup using either point clouds or 360 imagery and AI to track something or measure something, I mean, I'd have about 20 quid. But they're just popping up all the time. But it's just tech for tech's sake. It's interesting, but if you don't embed it as part of your process, you're just creating another problem, because you're creating another silo of expertise, another silo of data that, again, only that small group of users knows about and knows what to do with. If it's not feeding into the process and making the whole process stronger, it's actually, what it's doing is it's making the whole process weaker. And saying this is something that was recognized and has been addressed in the manufacturing sector for decades. And I really want to see the construction sector embrace the same thought process. And maybe they are in pockets. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to tar the whole sector with one brush. But looking at the problem rather than looking at technology that you think might solve the problem. Digital twins are kind of put in that category. It's a very broad encompassing term. What you need to do is look at a specific problem, and that might be a pocket, might be a particular function in the company's process, or it might be a connection between functions that are each individually working effectively, but there's a break in workflow and communication, and fix that. And if you do that enough, then you end up with an end-to-end process that's fixed.
I mean,
you can't parachute in a digital twin, wave a magic wand, and everything gets twinned. That's crazy. It's a concept. It's not a solution.
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of very clearly kind of say to people that if you're looking at using digital twins, you need to have a problem you're looking to solve or a purpose that you're looking to use it for. Absolutely. Rather than digital twins sound great, I'll have one.
Yeah.
And I think the big challenge that we often see is that obviously new construction is only a fraction of the building stock that exists in the UK. There's obviously going to be a need to create digital twins, or whatever you want to refer to them as, for the existing building stock, and that's going to be a challenge in itself. And I think one of the things that we try and encourage people to be careful of is when you are doing new construction, there is the possibility of capturing all the data or close to all the data that goes through that process. It's probably not going to be cost effective to do that to the same degree for all the existing building stock, which is where it becomes important to think of what do you need it for? What is the actual purpose that you're going to address? What's your kind of sense around that?
You're absolutely right. It's always a case of what needs to change, and whether that's a process, an application workflow process, or whether that's a physical building or a bridge or structure, a tower, whatever it is. It's what are we actually going to change, and that determines the information that we need to collect. So again, going back to the brief experience I've had with laser scanning and point clouds, tremendous for capturing the geometry of a structure. But a lot of the time I see point clouds, people refer to point clouds as digital twins. Well, what they really mean is just a 3D photograph. It's like you can be there, but unless you actually add information into it, it is just a 3D photograph. It can, and it's it's beguiling because it looks so cool, being able to navigate around inside this virtual space, but it doesn't actually solve any problems. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you need to capture the information that's important for what it is you're about to do.
Yeah.
And then turn that into a form that you can do something with, because you can't do anything with a point cloud. I mean, it's a means to an end. A client I'm working with in the States at the moment, whose business is as-built surveys, said, look, nobody wants a point cloud. What they want is a Revit model, because then I can do something with a Revit model. So let's focus on the end goal rather than the stepping stone to get there. And then once we've got there, throw it away, or at least keep the last one, but when I change something, then throw the old one away because that's no longer relevant. So you only ever need to keep, version 0 or version 0 minus 1. As soon as you've actually changed something, the version minus 1 is irrelevant. Throw it away. It's just using up space. The other thing also is that again, there's point clouds are not all built the same. If you're going for million points per second measurement, you're going to have a problem with data. But not all laser scanners produce data files that big. So again, it's using the right tool for the job rather than carte blanche, just trying to solve every problem. Treat every problem as a nail just because you're a hammer salesman. So yeah, it's got to be the right tool for the right job. And again, going back to the AMC advert, we're completely independent, completely neutral about whatever technology the client wants to use. Our challenge, or our talent, if you like, our focus is on making that effective for them. So once they've decided on the tools that they want to use, they've got a preference for CAD or PLM design software, they've got a preference for data management. Our raison d'etre is to make that effective for them and actually link up, fill in the gaps and make it flow. Everybody can see what they need to do their job. This is one of my favorite things is, imagine a world where everybody had all the information they need to do their job at the time they need to do it. And that you didn't have to go and ask somebody else to stop what they're doing to give you some data so you could do your job. And that's really what we try and achieve, is we try and help everyone do their job with the right data at the right time.
No, that's amazing. I could chat about this all day. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left. I know you've shared a case study on 3D printing works on the Digital Twin Hub, which I do encourage everyone to take a look at. Can you just kind of very briefly just take us through what's kind of in that document?
It's a really simple example. We do a lot of work with 3D printer manufacturers. Again, Boston's a big center for that. And we've done everything from writing firmware for them right through to slicing and preparation, data preparation. But one of the common problems, in fact, a problem common to pretty much all users of 3D printers at an industrial level, not prototyping but actual production, is managing the print resource you've got, the production resource you've got. 3D printers, as anybody who's ever used one will know, often have a tendency to go wrong. But if you want to use your resource 24 hours a day, you can't be there, have someone watching it. So for a particular client in Boston, we wrote a piece of software for them that actually connects to their 3D printers on a client basis. So if I've got one printer, I can connect to it. If I've got 10, I can connect to them. If I've got 100 spread across 3 sites, I can see my entire resource. Connect them over the internet, so they're all internet enabled, and allows you to manage production basically. So I can see what's going on. I can see the queue for my entire print farm. I can access it through mobile devices, so I get alerts if something has gone wrong, and I can queue up jobs. It's a really simple example, but conceptually, if you took that principle and applied it to a building, so where I might have, it could be used for, for safety, for fire alarms, or for security, for breaches. It's just collecting data that happens to be related to a particular physical asset, and then presenting it to the user such that they can do something with it. That is, for me, is a digital twin. It's a digital representation of a physical thing that allows me to do something about it.
Brilliant.
We've got quite a few other clients that we've built what would be called a digital twin. Unfortunately, so few of them we're actually allowed to talk about, because the clients see it as giving them a competitive advantage. And therefore it's proprietary, and it's their software. We just provide the service. We don't own or sell the software.
Yeah.
So
no, that's amazing. I think, well, I found that really interesting and useful conversation to go through. So thanks ever so much for taking the time this morning, Andy. I think that was hopefully really helpful.
My pleasure, Sam. My pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone for joining for the.
We should talk about mobile application development sometime, maybe. But yeah, that's
that'd be great. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining this morning. we'll be back later in the year with some more speakers on the next set of Hub Insights series. Thanks very much, and Andy, and have a great day, everyone.